World War II, the Pacific Theatre, a brutal struggle for survival. Japan, once an unstoppable force, now faced the crushing might of the United States Navy. Island after island fell. Hope dwindled with each passing day. It was in this crucible of despair that a new, terrifying weapon emerged. The marine kamikaze. These weren't your typical soldiers. These were men on one-way missions, piloting explosive-laden boats directly into enemy ships. Their goal to die for the Emperor, taking as many of the enemy with them as possible. Imagine the deafening roar of engines, the salt spray stinging their faces, the knowledge that each nautical mile brought them closer to oblivion. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a calculated strategy, born of desperation and steeped in the Bushido Code, the warrior ethos of Japan. These men believed they were fulfilling their duty, sacrificing themselves to protect their homeland. The story of the marine kamikaze is not for the faint of heart. It's a story of courage and madness, of sacrifice and savagery. It's a story that needs to be told. It's a story we must never forget. To understand the marine kamikaze, you have to understand the situation Japan faced. By 1944, the tide of the war had turned. The once mighty Imperial Japanese Navy was a shadow of its former self. American industrial might churned out ships and planes at an alarming rate. The island-hopping campaign was relentless. American forces were getting closer and closer to the Japanese mainland. The thought of invasion, of dishonor, was unthinkable. Japan's leaders knew they couldn't win a conventional war. Something drastic had to be done. Enter the kamikaze. In the air, planes became guided missiles. At sea, it was the same story, only with boats.
These weren't random acts of desperation. They were part of a larger strategy known as Ketsugo, a final all-out offensive designed to inflict maximum casualties and break the enemy's will to fight. The logic was grim, but simple. If enough Americans were killed, maybe, just maybe, they would negotiate a peace.
It's hard for us to fathom such a mindset today. But to understand the kamikaze, you have to try and see the world through their eyes. Death before dishonor, sacrifice for the Emperor. These weren't just slogans, they were deeply ingrained cultural beliefs. What kind of man volunteers to die for his country? What goes through the mind of someone who knows they're going on a one-way mission? The answers are complex and disturbing. Kamikaze pilots, both in the air and at sea, were often young men, barely old enough to shave. They came from all walks of life, students, farmers, shopkeepers. They were indoctrinated from a young age with the ideals of Bushido and the divinity of the Emperor. Training was brutal. They were taught to be ruthless, to embrace death. They practiced ramming their boats again and again, knowing that one day it wouldn't be a drill.
Can you imagine the pressure, the fear, the weight of an entire nation's hopes resting on your shoulders? But there was also a sense of purpose, of camaraderie. They were brothers in arms, united in their belief that they were fighting for a righteous cause. They wrote goodbye letters to their families, poems filled with love and longing and a chilling acceptance of their fate.
The most common type of marine kamikaze craft was the Shino, a small, fast suicide boat often made of wood. It was essentially a torpedo with a man in it. Packed with explosives, they were difficult to spot and even harder to stop. The Shino saw action in several key battles, including the Battle of Okinawa, one of the bloodiest of the entire war. Imagine the scene: American ships lit up like Christmas trees, bombs raining down from the sky, and then, out of the darkness, these small, fast boats, each one a floating bomb, racing towards them. The impact was devastating.
While many Shino were destroyed before they could reach their targets, those that got through inflicted heavy casualties. The USS Callahan, a destroyer, was sunk by a Shino, becoming the last American destroyer lost in World War II. But the human cost was even greater. Hundreds of young Japanese men perished in these attacks, their bodies never recovered. And on the American side, the psychological toll was immense. The constant threat of these suicide attacks kept sailors on edge, their nerves frayed.